Charles Sousa, to you first. There are deficit reduction imperatives out there. There are people who want us to make some progress on fighting poverty. Can you do both at the same time?
They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, we have to. We have to be progressive. We look at what is happening in the world today, and we look at what's happening in the opposition. The extreme views of both sides is not the answer to our issues. We need to be progressive. We need to be fiscally responsible in order to attack the deficit, in order to create more prosperity, and we need to help those most vulnerable, and we need to be socially and environmentally compassionate. And what I suggest is that we need to continue to break that cycle of poverty. Deb Matthews, in her report, did a good job of putting forward some recommendations that we all participated in our own town hall meetings and discussions with stakeholders. And certainly others that have had their hand in those most vulnerable have done a good job. Certainly Francis Lankin and others coming forward with their report have put great recommendations. What we need is to ensure that our young people, especially the children, don't get caught in the same issues as has occurred in the past. They need to be well educated, and they need to have some of that jobs and opportunities going forward. It's not about more government, it's about more opportunity.
Eric Hoskins, can you fight poverty and the deficit at the same time?
Well, you have to, and absolutely you can. For the last year prior to this leadership race beginning, I was chair of the province's poverty reduction strategy. And in fact, my entire professional life I've been working with and on behalf of vulnerable children and youth in the work that I did prior to getting into politics. So it's an important part of, it's a priority for me personally. I know it's been a priority for this government as well. We've made some great strides. The first year of our 5-year anti-poverty strategy, we pulled 20,000 kids in this province out of poverty. There's still 400,000 kids that are poor. 150,000 of those use food banks every year. So we need to continue to work. Francis Lankin and Munir Sheikh have just released several weeks ago, I think, a seminal report. I would call it a blueprint and a foundation for moving forward. I have already said, I said at the Canadian Club that I would move forward on that, particularly the elements that speak to streamlining and simplifying, consolidating the benefits so it's more beneficial to the recipients themselves, increasing social assistance rates for the most vulnerable, and also particularly there's an aspect of their report which is often not spoken to, which talks about productive employment. In fact, Gerard talks about this, the opportunity, the possibility that whether it's individuals living with disability or those on Ontario Works, we need to make sure that
Gerard
they get the jobs.
Kennedy, you used to be the food bank guy. Would you accept the recommendations of the Munir Sheikh panel right now and make the improvements to social assistance that they asked for?
Yes, I would, but I do it in this context. I would say we're going to change all our social programs into potential programs. We can't afford not to maximize the potential contribution that people have. We actually have a labor market that requires the people who, 80% of disabled people who are educated, but we don't yet have them in their highest, best contribution. And we need to work with the private sector on the incentives that would help take people, maybe not completely off, maybe completely off welfare rolls and being able to support themselves. And now we have the necessity to do it because we needed to do what Drummond has said. See this is a transformational opportunity, a chance to get at that. You know, when I used to work at the food bank, we had a whole warehouse staffed by people who were capable, who had sophisticated skills, but they didn't fit the rigid blocks that too many companies had. And we've got to start to break that down. We have two invocations for that. One is the deficit, and the other one is this report now that says, let's not do what Mike Harris did. He forced a bunch of people on welfare to live destabilized lives. And I'll tell you right now, part of the reason our recovery wasn't as robust is that people were hurt by too many years of hard scrabble, of not being able to get by. We want kids and we want families to be as poor for as short a time possible, and there's a new approach, if we look at potential programs, that we can do that.
And I think that that's what Munir Sheikh and Francis Lankin largely are talking about when they, in their report, when they talk about particularly the disability community to work to move people into work who can. So I would work as using the Sheikh Lankin report as a starting point and implement it. But there's another aspect to this, and that is the linking of all our other policies and poverty. So, for example, in education, there are groups of kids who are either living in poverty now or going to end up in poverty. If we think about Aboriginal kids, kids in care, we know that those kids are not achieving the way they should. Aboriginal kids do not graduate at the same rates as kids in other parts of the community. So we got to lift those kids up. We got to make sure those kids do well so they don't end up in poverty.
Sandra Pupatello.
I think even in 2003, when we started that government back then under Dalton McGuinty, we had a $6 billion deficit and we still did right by people who are the most vulnerable. We improved all those services for people with developmental disabilities. We created the passport system. We increased welfare rates. We helped change regulation to make it easier for people who are on disability to work. We did those things even when we had a deficit before. We can do it again. And because I'm talking about jobs in the economy, that means jobs for people who are on welfare, jobs for people who have disabilities. If we focus on jobs in the economy, I believe everything else will follow,
but the
and I
focus-
intend to
Let's
do
hear
that.
first Glenn Murray and then Harinder Tucker.
Well, first of all, my son, I foster parented, had fetal alcohol syndrome. There's a lot of kids out there who just don't fit well, who need help. And we really have to focus energy. I've seen that firsthand. I know my son now is very successful as a father. I'm proudly a grandfather. He wasn't given much chance of that. And that's this sort of, sometimes people believe in a lot more than a job. So I've already talked about jobs, so I'll just park that for now. But it's a whole new economy. To get a decent job out of poverty, you need a university or college education or a trade. That wasn't true when most of us were in school.
You sure got to get out of high school to get in.
We have to get, no, but it's not enough.
I know,
We
but
actually
you
know.
gotta
The
get
Premier
there
said this
first.
many, many times. So our challenge now, which beyond what Munir and Francis said, is to get those folks to that level of education and to make sure that it's the right kind of skills. The You and Who programs that I started with Sheldon at that actually match kids in university and college to where the jobs are when you go to get a degree. And we need to do more market labor stuff. But getting out of poverty is more choices. So we have to have, and I'll finish this, Eric and I and Laurel Broughton did the social innovation thing. We've engaged 8,000, Tim brought in 8,000 amazing Ontarians. There's a policy sitting there that's fully funded that we could move out right now, and I think all of us would agree with it. Kathleen has been a big advocate of social enterprise, that we as Liberals uniquely created, and we're not yet using it. It's a strategy to get those million people on social assistance off. Where I disagree with Munir and Francis is, I don't think people with disabilities should be separately tracked. And Gerard has said this, and I agree with him. We need to have a strategy for people with disabilities. It cannot be a social assistance strategy.
Okay,
It has to be an enabling
Harinder
strategy.
Tucker, last word on this.
Steve, I mean, how do you get people out of poverty? I came to this country in 1974 with less than $10 in my pocket. By any definition, I will be in the poverty range, or maybe below poverty range. So I think the best thing to do is get people jobs, so they can become self-sustaining, give them the skills so they can become successful in their life. But I did here when I came to this country, I studied at night, worked during the day, improved myself, and at the end of the day, I opened my businesses. If I had stayed in the same rut, right, with the $7 and not having the qualification or not having the experience to provide. So my feeling is, at the end of the day, what you really need to do is focus on the economy, create jobs, give the people the opportunity so that they can actually work and get out of the rut of this poverty.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.